The race for Senate next year has journalists salivating. It is going to be a good one. Senator Chris Dodd has seen his approval ratings steadily erode, and that has encouraged Republicans that he is beatable. Democrats are also worried that Dodd could lose, and they want to keep that seat in Democratic hands. This week, a Democrat emerged to take on the 5-term senator. He is an attorney, a former Air Force officer, among other things, Merrick Alpert of Mystic. And Mr. Alpert, thanks for being with us.
Dennis, thanks for having me.
This Sunday morning. First of all, give us a quick biography of yourself, because many people have never heard of you before.
Absolutely. I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, and I grew up in Colchester. I was raised by a single mother. My mom worked as a school teacher, and she cut bread at a local bakery as a second job to make ends meet. I scrimped and saved along with my mom, and thanks to the loans that the people of Connecticut gave me, I attended University of Connecticut. I graduated from Trinity College. I went on to graduate from Georgetown Law School. And once I got out of there, I had always been involved in one way or another in public activity and government affairs and whatnot. And I went and volunteered for the military. Went overseas to Bosnia as a volunteer and came back having served my nation in uniform there, and built successfully, grew and sold 2 small companies, and then married and had kids, and we live in Mystic, Connecticut right now.
And your wife, and you're bilingual, and your wife's from Colombia, correct?
Yeah, my Spanish, I wouldn't overstate it. I can speak a bit of Spanish, but my wife is originally from the nation of Colombia. She's a naturalized U.S. citizen, and so she is fluent in both languages.
Where'd you get your first taste of politics?
Well, the first time, it's funny, I actually remember as a kid going on a school trip, and this is a long time ago, but I remember going to the Capitol. There was a fire alarm at the Capitol. And the person who was chaperoning us said, "Wait, come on, you guys, come with me." And we went on a certain exit. And there was a very kind older woman who came over and hugged me and hugged all of us and spoke with us for a while. She reminded me a lot of my relatives, and it felt very good. And later on, people said to me that was El Grasso. And it's funny that I think some of these things begin your involvement early on. And then in a more formal way, I think growing up with the town hall meetings in Colchester, my mom, being a single mom, would often take us with her to these town hall meetings. And it was a very Norman Rockwell environment that I grew up with, in the sense that you were expected to be involved. You were expected to stand up when you morally believed something was right. And you were expected to speak your piece. And I think those values have stayed with me my whole life.
And in the 90s, you worked for the Bill Clinton campaign and Al Gore?
That's right. I started working for Gore when I was at Trinity College, and then I have stayed in touch with him throughout that period. And then I worked for Clinton Gore during the campaign. I was actually a delegate for Clinton from Connecticut to the convention in New York. And then I worked on the campaign. I worked on the inaugural and then on the healthcare campaign, where I volunteered and went out to Oklahoma to push because I fundamentally believe then, as I believe now, that every American should have proper health care.
Did you see yourself as having a future in politics back then?
You know, I think that there were always elements of it that I enjoyed. I think meeting people, interacting with people, listening to people, forming up solutions to people's problems, though things like that, Dennis, meant something to me then, they mean something to me now. There are elements of it that bothered me then, and they bothered me now even more, and some of those are my motivation to run.
Yeah, as we look at some of your records here, you've donated to Senator Chris Dodd in the past.
That's right.
Have you met him before?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that my migration away from Senator Dodd really tracks the migration away from him that the people of Connecticut have made. As I would begin to learn about these AIG stories, about the bonus scandal, as I would see the stories about him moving his family to Iowa, as I would see the stuff about the Sweetheart Mortgage deal or the vacation home in Ireland, my first inclination, Dennis, was to say to whoever raised the issue to deny it. I would say that's not true. He wouldn't do that. And then story after story after story, and I just began to feel this is not the fella I thought I knew, and not the fella that did good work years ago for the state.
So when you donated to him, you believed in him. It wasn't just a sense of party obligation.
Well, you know, look, as you can see, and I post this very honestly and openly on my website, I've donated to really everybody in the delegation, all of the folks that represent Connecticut in Washington. When they would call, of course they didn't call, when one of their staff members would call, I would donate. I just have always been an active Democrat, and we've had the good fortune of selling a couple of businesses and having some money in the bank, and I've just always felt that whatever I had, even when it was very little, that I had an obligation as a Democrat to try to help other Democrats.
When did you decide you wanted to challenge Senator Dodd?
Well, there was a very specific day. I think, as I said, the backdrop was watching this behavior going on, and then watching, obviously, him being less than candid. But as I began to visit with more folks around the state and see the direct pain, see people losing their jobs, losing their homes, see that the senator was not focused on job creation, that he didn't have a small business background, that he wasn't able to bring a different perspective to the issues. There was a very specific day where I went to go see my barber of 25 years in Hartford, and then went to go see my mom, and she had her retirement account that she was looking at in her kitchen in Colchester, where I grew up. And I then went from there to sit with my wife. And we tucked our kids into bed. We got in bed ourselves. I think the AIG bonus scandal was playing out a few feet away on television. And Dennis, at that point, I just said to her, I can't watch this anymore. I can't watch someone do something I think is morally wrong. At the same time, I'm trying to teach my kids to do what's morally right and to tell the truth. And that disconnect for me was probably the final straw. I also think that the more that I would be traveling around the state and interacting with small business people, it became clear that I have small business experience that Senator Dodd, who's never had a private sector job, doesn't have. And the realization is the only way we're going to make Connecticut a better state, stop losing population, stop losing young people, stop the brain drain. The only way we're going to make this place a better state is by focusing on it very candidly. And that means bringing people in from the outside who aren't career politicians.
Do you think the senator is dishonest?
You know, I think people need to make their own decisions. I would urge people to go onto YouTube, for example, and watch those series of days where he is interviewed about the AIG bonuses. Clearly, I've made my decision with regard to his behavior. And I think, quite frankly, most of the folks who are Democrats in this state, as well as independents and Republicans, have made their decision. And I think over long term, they will be in agreement with me.
Do you think he was lying or confused?
Well, I'd hate to think that the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee was confused about a pretty basic issue and about a large segment of his bill. If that's the case, that really concerns me, because now we're talking about a basic issue of competence.
And so you think he was lying?
Well, I think he was being less than candid. That's for darn sure. But again, for me, I was very clear in my announcement about why I had discomfort and had disconnected from Senator Dodd. I think it's much more important, as I lay out the vision that I have for the people of Connecticut, for job growth, for small business growth, it's much more important for me to talk about the positive vision I have. I think we're all in agreement about his problems and his issues, and what I've begun to do, obviously, is very rapidly move away from that, and I'll spend 15 months talking about my positive vision for job growth and small business growth in Connecticut. You
know, in terms of your beliefs, you're much different than, Ned Lamont was in 2006, but he had support among the Democrats, which is why he defeated Joe Lieberman in the primary, yet he didn't have the support among the Republicans and the independents, and that's why he lost in November. The case is a little bit different here, because it appears that Senator Dodd does have some support among the Democrats, but he's losing it among the independents and the Republicans. How are you going to beat him in a primary? Well, you're going to beat him by doing something which is revolutionary, which is you're going to stand up and tell the truth. I'm not a career politician. When you listen to me speak or you meet me, you realize right away, excuse me, this guy's not a career politician. So to travel around the state for the next 15 months and meet people and share very openly my vision for creating jobs in Connecticut, for creating small business in Connecticut, for getting the state moving again, that is an extraordinary thing that I think will connect with the people of the state. I have great respect for Ned Lamont. I commend him for having the courage of his conviction and stepping up to do what he did. I think there is an analogy between the Lamont situation and mine, in the sense that while my bank account is a heck of a lot smaller than Ned's, there was a disconnect that Senator Lieberman had from the Democratic Party at that time, and I think there's also a disconnect that Senator Dodd has from the Democratic Party today. What are you hearing from Democrats since you've announced?
Rank and file, it's amazing. I was up, Dennis, till about 3:30 this morning responding to the emails that I had gotten, the emails and the cards and the phone calls, and I was just trying to email people back and get back to them. We're receiving dozens a day of emails from folks who want to volunteer, emails from folks who want to get together, emails from folks who are contributing. So it's pretty amazing. It's clearly struck a responsive chord. The only exception are a couple people in the establishment who obviously have a vested interest in protecting themselves. As President Obama says, change is never easy, and that we know.
Have you got any calls from elected officials saying, hey, don't do this?
I place courtesy calls to everybody in the delegation. I place courtesy calls to Chairman Nancy DiNardo. I placed a courtesy call to Justin Kronholm, who's at the Democratic Party headquarters. And I had a terrific conversation with Justin. He's a long friend of mine, and he just was very kind and very very gracious. He obviously respectfully disagrees with what I'm doing, but we had a very, very kind conversation. And, you know, look, we're all Democrats. At the end of the day, I've been a Democrat my whole life. I've done everything in my power to help this party, and I'll continue doing it.
Did you manage to get through to any of the delegation?
I haven't spoken with anybody yet. I've got one call that I need to return later today.
Jonathan Pelto, a longtime Democratic operative, was quoted as saying this week that he feels you should run for state rep or something.
Yeah, I always appreciate an endorsement, but I'm running for U.S. Senate. And so, look, Jonathan's a friend. I interned for Jonathan for several months, about 20 years back. Although we need to tell Jonathan he's got to start spelling my name right, because he keeps spelling it wrong. And so it's Alpert with a P, not with a B. But that's all right. He doesn't, I don't fault him for it. He's a good fella.
Did you notify the Dodd campaign that you were going to do this?
You know, they clearly had known about it, no question. They clearly known about it.
Any conversations with them at all?
Well, I actually had one of the folks from their camp, and I won't disclose that individual's name because they're in the Dodd with Dodd, but they sent me one of the kindest emails I've ever received the other night about courage of conviction, about doing this. And they said, look, obviously we can't say this openly, but I thought that was an extraordinary email to send from inside their group.
Well, the primary certainly keeps all of us employed in the media.
I promise to
cover,
give you the ratings.
All right, Merrick Alpert, thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll see you on this program again. And we'll,
Dennis, thank you. You've got a great show.
Explore some further issues down the road. Thank you very much.